going to speak about Kitniyos. We know that Chazal wrote about Kitniyos, Poretz Geder in Shechenu Nachash, someone who's a Poretz Geder when it comes to Kitniyos, if she's bitten by a snake. And the idea is that when Chazal make takanas, especially one as early as this one from times of the Orzera, from the early Rishonim already, that Bnei Ashkenaz were machmir not to eat Kitniyos for various reasons, which we'll get into in a second. I heard about, I don't know if it's a blog or a website or whatever the difference is between the two, people trying to liberate everyone from Kitniyos, which is wholly ridiculous and doesn't make any sense, because people are clearly not learning and going through the poskim and understand how chamer it is that even in the years of famine brought down the poskim, that they needed to bring in special bezdin to be matir only certain Kitniyos at certain times, because of people were literally dying. There was no food to eat, especially if there wasn't going to be flour. And the Aruch HaShulchan writes that such a thing nowadays is not common at all, because we have potatoes. As long as you have potatoes, you're good to go. Now, and we have to also understand the sheet of the Chachmas Adam, who asked potato flour, and according to him, obviously his chumrah was not neskabel at all by K'mat all of Klal Yisrael. So we'll see why that chumrah was not accepted, even though potato flour looks the same as any other flour and make cakes out of it like we do everything else. But obviously it's permitted. Everyone permits it K'mat, and you don't have to worry about that. And we'll see, why, in which cases were the Rabbanim were Mekel, where were they Machmir, which in most cases they were, and exactly why it was a method to some svara to a lot of the uncertainty over here. So first things first is, how come if Kitniyos are mutter, right? In other words, right, on Pesach, Shulchan Aruch passes very clearly that rice is mutter on Pesach, rice of Kitniyos, right? It's not chametz, right? How come altogether was there a gzera in Ashkenazi countries to answer them? So there are three reasons brought down in the poskim. The first one is because of the Amei Arts, that since these Kitniyos, and I'm purposely not defining it, and we'll see in a minute why I'm not defining Kitniyos yet, because legumes is not correct, that these Kitniyos were grounded up and made into cakes and made into bread and made into all other things, and made into tafshilim, different cooked foods, the same way flour was. And Amei Arts made mistakes, and if you look in the Shari Tshuva in the beginning of Simon Taf Samech, he brings actually a case where there was a Rav and his wife, a Rabbitzin. He brings down one of the towns, made a certain fish, and the wife coated the fish with some type of thing that was mutter. That wasn't even Kitniyos. And this Amei Arts' wife came to the house and saw that, hey, look, the Rav and his wife eat breaded fish. So she went home and she made the breaded fish for her husband. And when the Rav heard what happened, he got so scared. He told his wife, "Never, we can't make this food anymore. Tell everybody all these types of things, all types of flour, all usher," and so on and so forth. The lots of Amei Arts didn't know how to differentiate between different types of flour and stuff that are not, and other types of grains that are grounded into flour, and therefore they answered these Kitniyos, which the derech was to make them eat them in the same tzura that we did real chametz. The second svara was that they were grown in close proximity of each other, right? Flour and different grains that come to chametz, and also the other grains that are what we call Kitniyos, were grown together. A lot of times you found pieces of one into the other, which is still even again nowadays by a lot of these different grains. They are grown very close together, especially kinma that we'll see later on. They are grown close in proximity to different flour, and you cook them, they turn into chametz because there's actual particles. And we know on Pesach, chametz is also b'mashu. We have to be especially careful, and that's the second reason why Chacham made a takana to forbid Kitniyos.
Not rice.
I'm sorry?
Not rice, though. Rice is grown close to wheat.
That also is, sure. Even nowadays, even Sfardim who matter, let's say for myself, our family is accustomed to eat rice. That's only after checking it 3 times. Now, I remember my mother and my grandmother, they should be well. If we're gonna have rice on Pesach, that means you have rice that's 100% non-enriched of any kind, 100% pure. It's laid out on a white table, and they check each grain 3 times.
But it's not because they're grown together.
No, they're grown close to each other. that the fields are close to each other, and therefore there's a lot of mixture. So even the Sfarim who are Mekel, don't think it's we just go to the store and pick up anything. We don't eat tons of it because it's very difficult to check, very painstaking. You go and each grain is checked 3 times.
Do they have certified rice that they not grow next to?
So they're trying to start that, but that's all new things. Even in Eretz Yisrael, where they have kashers, it still says it's kosher after it's checked 3 times, not to deviate from the minhag that always was. But even those who eat it, it's not like a holy, just go and buy whatever any rice you want and stick it in the pot and eat it.
A lot of Sephardim don't eat rice then?
A lot of them don't even eat rice altogether. Right? A lot of Moroccans don't eat rice altogether because of a lot of these issues. And even those who do, it's under careful supervision. It's not something simple.
To be checked.
Right, it has to be checked many times. Yeah.
Do you know why there was this divergence between Ashkenazi and Sephardim for Kitniyos?
It could be, well, first of all, it's mutter. It depends on where you lived. It could be in the place where the Sephardim lived. They didn't have these issues that the Ashkenazim had in their countries. So they felt that the Rabbanim in those towns, in those countries, felt it was necessary to make such takanas. I don't know what was going on, in the Sephardim countries at that time. But I guess Chacham didn't, Kitniyos is mutter. They didn't feel like they had to make takanas and gzeras. But at the same time, even for myself, my family won't eat chickpeas, and they won't eat kidney beans. Even we eat rice, because there's other issues in Iran and Iraq. There are other issues, that they had with those things when they're being imported or exported. Flour was routinely put in, so they shouldn't get stuck to the bags. Each family in each place has their own minhagim that they have to keep. My mother will, the way that Ashkenazim treat rice, my mother will treat chickpeas. Even though there could be, there's halakhic reasons to differentiate between the two. But each family has their own masaras and customs, we have to keep them. And the third reason, brought down the Be'er Halacha, B'Shin Rabbeinu Menoach, is that each year, depending on how much rain or how little rain or snow, the crops look different. And a lot of times, you could have Kitniyos crops look exactly the same as regular flour, as regular grain crops that could turn into chametz, and vice versa. Sometimes they look alike, sometimes they don't look alike, and depending on the year of rain, they went out and they checked, and they see that a lot of times even the chacham can make mistakes based on how much rain or how little rain was there that year. So therefore, according to these because of these 3 reasons, Chazal asered Kitniyos in those Ashkenazi countries. Now, we have to understand also, how did they aser them? In other words, did they aser them even in an ofen, even in a way that's even more chamer than chametz itself? For example, we know that chametz, right? If I take grain, I take barley, or I take wheat, or whatever it is, I take flour that's made from one of the chamesh aminim that turn into chametz, and I just take it by itself. It's no water came into contact with it, nothing happened to it. It's just there by itself. It's 100% mutter on Pesach. There's no problem with it. Nowadays we know our flour is all bleached and enriched, and then there's all types of issues. It's all chametz gomer. It has to be sold. You can't own it. But if I were to theoretically find regular grain that was untouched and unbleached and no water fell on it, from after a time it was detached from the ground, there's no problem with this type. I can eat it straight. I'm allowed to eat it. Now the question is, Kitniyos seems to be more chamer than that, because Kitniyos, if they were to have regular rice grain that no water came on top of, or if I were to make sure before Pesach to take Kitniyos, spread them out, make sure nothing was mixed in, and it was totally clean, and no water came in contact with them, and they weren't touched, they weren't bleached, they weren't enriched, nothing, would they still be aser or not? And the truth is, we find a tremendous machlokes haposkim on this topic. The Chuvas of Marasham writes that how could it be that the tuffle should be more machmir than the ikr? That doesn't make any sense. How could you have such a thing? So according to him, all these dinim of Kitniyos is only after water comes in contact with them. Before water comes in contact with them, there's no problem. And he goes even further to say that to make matzahs out of Kitniyos is mutter. Because if I'm allowed to make matzah out of things that turn into chametz gomer, like barley and spelt and flour, then I should be able to do the same thing with Kitniyos too. What's stopping me is making matzah out of rice? Take rice, take other Kitniyos, take corn flour, take corn, grind it up well, do the same type of hashgacha that we do on regular matzahs, do it for the Kitniyos, and make matzahs out of it.
Tortilla chips.
I'm sorry? Tortilla chips. Now, all these types of things, according to the Marasham, according to Nishmas Adam, I saw brought down also according to Shulchan Aruch Harav, they all don't understand the svara. How can the tafel be more machmir than the ikr? If the whole reason why we astered Kitniyos is only because they were dome, they looked, people came to mix it up together with real chametz. So let's make it in the same way that we make chametz. And if we do it in the same way that we make those things, then we obviously take great care to make sure they don't become chametz. We make sure no water comes into contact with them, and if they're being used and they're being needed, and we don't let them go. We're allowed to, even with regular dough and flour, right? We need them, and they don't become chametz until we let them go, before we stick them into the oven. Let's do the same exact process with kitniyos that we will do with things that could technically come into chametz, and it should be mutter, it should be fine. And that was the opinion of many of the Gdolim. Now that has not been discovered at all by any of the reputable kashrus organizations or any of the Rabbanim, and the reason is, it's brought down by the poskim, and the Chubas Ma'amar Mordechai, and the poskim that came after him, is because that since people know that kitniyos aren't aser be'etzem, if we would give leniency in the form of how it's made, people would just go back to eating all of it altogether in the beginning, and the whole purpose of the zakhan in the first place would be null and void. And it makes sense. No one will come to eat chametz, but if I allow you to eat rice in rice matzah, so people will say rice matzah. What's the difference between rice matzah and rice cakes and regular rice? Let me just make it in a tafshil. Let me make it in a regular food, and therefore, they said that in such a way we're not going to let. It's not any worse, right? It's not any worse or any better than the. Thank you. Pleasure. It's not any worse or any better than the other reasons why we ask for kitniyos for Pesach than if we eat it in this way. But Lamaisa, the Svar makes a lot of sense. When I saw the Svar, I said that's genius. How could it be that we're going to ask for kitniyos much more than we're going to ask for chametz itself? But Lamaisa, that's what it comes out. Only because it's just Stam Chumrah, we're coming to safeguard the original takana of kitniyos. Because again, once we were matir of making matzah out of rice, then we will come to eat rice itself or other kitniyos itself. Yeah.
I once heard a very big Rav speak about using peanut oil in a manufactured item.
We will discuss that.
Okay.
Very good. We will. That is definitely one of the topics. A very big point of contention. Peanut oil. So now, truth be told, making matzahs out of other minim, even some of the Sephardic poskim I saw brought down to be machmir, even though the rice could be mutter according to them. To make rice matzahs would be worse because people would come to try to be able to the chova Pesach with them, and okay. But the idea is though that even though making matzah from things that could become chametz is permitted, kitniyos we will still forbid kitniyos made in the same surah. So we see that the kitniyos in every surah kol shehi, any way, shape or form of them are aser, even though the gabe chametz themselves, or chametz, but the grains themselves that could come into chametz, we will only be machmir once water comes into contact with them. Now, the question is now that they are brought up, so we'll speak about it, is shemen kitniyos. Peanut oil, first of all, peanuts, you have to know if peanuts are bechal kitniyos or not. Like we mentioned before, now we're not going to call it legumes on purpose because it's not true. They're not it's not only legumes. But what about the oil that's extracted from different kitniyos? Peanut oil, cottonseed oil. We know most poskim permit cottonseed oil. How come that's mutter, and how come most or almost all of the kashrus organizations do not allow peanut oil? And for that fact, most Ashkenazi don't eat peanuts, and they consider that as kitniyos in Eretz Yisrael. They for sure don't eat it. That's a minhag in Eretz Yisrael. It's clear. And in America, most of them don't allow it, even though Moshe Feinstein seems to permit them, and he permitted peanut oil as well. That could be what you're referring to. And we have to understand why that's become that way, that we don't allow peanuts or peanut oil. Right? If a family has a clear minhag, it could be different. But generally, it's not eaten in America or in Canada. In Eretz Yisrael, for sure, peanuts and peanut oil are not used. So you have to understand what's the difference between Shem and Kitniyos. So now, Shem and Kitniyos, the Ramah brings down, but when he brings the Isra of Kitniyos, he mentions that even though you're not allowed to eat kitniyos, you're allowed to own them on Pesach, right? Obviously, one does not have to include them in the mechira They don't have to sell them with chametz because there's no issur owning kitniyos. And if those were cholim, those were sick, or for children who can't eat anything else, obviously they're allowed to be fed. They're allowed to be fed. If kitniyos falls into a tafshil, we know the rules of bittul are not as chomer as chametz. Chametz we know is also b'mashu on Pesach. When it comes to kitniyos, the rules are much more lenient. But that being said, the Ramah says that if I have shem and kitniyos, so they used to make, they used to extract oil from different types of kitniyos, and they would use that to light lamps in the shuls and their homes to give light into the house. Right before there was electricity, obviously. So now let's say I have that light in close proximity to my food, and it drips. That oil will drip into my food and drip onto my table. Are we worried about that? Ramah says you're allowed to get hana from it. You're allowed to even have it close to your table. We didn't ask it in such a way that it will get mixed in. That it will get mixed in. It's okay. But from that Ramah seems that it's only usher to eat it, but to get the derive benefit would be mutter. But we see that the oil derived from it, at least, we're not allowed to eat. From that Ramah. And again, the Maharsham we mentioned before, who said that we're not going to asher kitniyos any worse than we're going to asher chametz, said, no, the Ramah only meant that when water comes into contact. But if water doesn't come into contact, even that shaman will be totally mutter. So again, the Maharsham goes according to his own shita, that if I extract oil from kitniyos, well, as long as water never came into contact with it, we're not going to asher it. And the other poskim will hold, well, let's take a look at chametz. All the juices and the alcohol and the different things that we extract from chametz, we consider to be chametz gomer, right? Even though those who are makbid not to sell chametz gomer, will sell alcohol and spirits and all those other types of things, because it is machlokus. The gabi juices that are extracted, alcohol or different liquids that are extracted from chametz. By kitniyos, we won't make it any different. So those who will matter will say, well, we're not going to ask it any differently than any other types of chametz. As long as water doesn't come into contact, we'll permit it. And Moshe Feinstein held that he writes even in the Tshuva in Chelek Gimel Semen Samach Gimel Nor Chaim that
what's chametz gomer?
Chametz gomer is pure chametz. That it isn't mixed with anything else. Mm-hmm. So now things that are pure chametz. Now he said that he saw people mattering peanut oil, which nowadays is totally foreign to us. The OU, Star K, COR, nobody that I know, especially in American Eretz Yisrael. Corn oil, the same thing. The same way that the kitniyos themselves are usher, they more or less categorically forbade the oil that is extracted from them also. Now the question is, if that's the case, how come cottonseed oil is permitted? Right? It's Eidos brought down. We have testimony from Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, who also permitted. I'm sorry?
Nobody eats cotton.
Oh, excellent. That's one of the svars brought down. Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, right, permitted cottonseed oil, and after him, all the Rabbanim and all the Gedolim permitted cottonseed oil for two main reasons. The first reason is because, first of all, we don't eat cottonseed. It's not eaten. So the fact that it's not eaten, I won't come to eat it. Even if I come to eat it, there's nothing there to come to eat to. Right? By corn oil, or by oil extracted from, let's say, rice or anything else, so rice milk like they have nowadays, all these other things, if I eat them, I might come to eat the kitniyos themselves, and then therefore, again, the whole gezerah of kitniyos will go out the window, like we mentioned earlier. But when it comes to cottonseed, no one will come to eat cottonseed, because cottonseed is not eaten. So therefore, the oil extract of cottonseed was permitted. Now there's another reason why also that it could be that's mutter, and that is we have to look at also how the tzura of the gezerah of kitniyos was. Right, the Taz in Siman Tafsir and Gimel asks a bam kasha. His kasha is as follows: Anis, that the Ramah says is not considered kitniyos. Right, they make deal from anis, that's a different type of grain. Also Kimmel, he says, is not kitniyos. Even though Mishnah Berurah writes they're very difficult to, since they were grown in close proximity to chametz, very hard to extract them. So therefore, people should know it's hard to give a hechsher on them practically for Pesach. Even though on Yom Tov Achron, Mishnah Berurah says one can be makel for these types of foods, but be'etzem they're not considered kitniyos. Anis, Kimmel, but chardal, but mustard seed. Right, the meaning is right. The Ramah brings down that we don't eat at all, and we know that mustard seed is not legumes, not kitniyos. So the question is, ask the Taz, how come we're permitting Kimmel and anis, and we're not permitting mustard seeds? Mustard should be mutter. It's all listed. They all look the same. So answers the Taz. I'll tell you why. Because mustard seeds are grown in sprouts, in a shoot, but the kimmel and anise are not grown in shoots and sprouts. And things that are grown in sprouts or in shoots look like grains, and since they look like grains, they can be easily confused with kitniyos or other grains, and therefore they have to be forbidden. Masha'in kain, this kimmel and the anise, right? Kimmel, we're not exactly sure what it is 100%. Some people say it's caraway, some say coriander. The different, right? Because of that, all of them become also. We're not exactly sure what the kimmel is, but they're not grown and they don't look the same as other kitniyos. The kimmel and the anise. Masha'in kain by the chardal, by the mustard, they are. So we get also another gilui into how the Tekanos Chazal was. Even though, and this is they're agreeing to, mustard seed is not kitniyos, is not part of the family of kitniyos that they asked originally, but they asked it because it grows in the same shoot. How it's grown, the sprouts and the shoots are very similar to other grains. Now, also other poskim also answer this stira, this kasha, by saying that they gathered in mustard seeds the same way they would gather grains in the field. So even in the way that it was gathered in the fields, we take into consideration to see whether or not something is considered kitniyos. Even though it doesn't have all the same properties, it's not from the same family, but because in the field it was gathered and put together the same way that they did the other grains, it was nichlal, was included in the isser of kitniyos. That's what the post can bring down. So now now that we understand that, cotton seed doesn't grow in shoots and sprouts and isn't gathered in the same way the other grains are. So because it really is different in all shapes and sizes from all of the kitniyos, but the Chamim allowed cotton seed, and that's the minig nowadays. All of the cash organizations, more or less that I know of, permit cotton seed oil, and it's used by come out everybody that I know. Could be again those who have different minhagim one way or the other. Right? People don't eat garlic. People don't eat other vegetables that have any types of appeal to them. I'm not getting to all those minhagim. Those who have clear minhagim a certain way, I'm not coming to uproot those. Now we have to delve a little bit deeper now, and ask a big question. That is that when Chazal answered kitniyos, did they answer only what they had in front of them, or did they answer everything for lolam vad, anything that comes and looks as if they were being the kitniyos? And obviously the nafkaminas would be quinoa and other things that they're finding nowadays that are not necessarily legumes. They're not part of the legume family. They're not in the grain family. Not in the grain family. But at the same time, they may or may not have the same reasons that we mentioned at the beginning of this year why they asked for kitniyos. And we know that's a big machlokes amongst the poskim. We know the Star K and Ray Heinemann allow quinoa because supposedly. I'm sorry. Yeah, this year though also they changed their policy this year, and the reason is simple. I heard that Ray Heinemann took quinoa and he ground it, and he tested all different types of tests that you would do to grain, and he found it to be different and said, okay, it's different. So you cannot apply the laws of the regular kitniyos to quinoa, and therefore the Star K permits it. If you look at Moshe's tshuva, he writes very clearly there. Even though we don't pass like Rav Moshe in regards to peanuts, because Rav Moshe held that he said in Russia they ate it and he stopped people eating it, and they didn't have peanuts in the time of Chazal when they asked for the rest of the kitniyos, so how could we ask for it also? Rav Moshe is very, very clear in saying that kitniyos was only a takana for things that they had back then. Things that would come afterwards were not included in that takana whatsoever. We cannot just take things and throw it in there. And the Rabbanim of the Star Case cite this Rav Moshe as a proof to quinoa and say, look, that's not the way it was, and who says that we have to come and ask for everything else? That just because it looks and similar, why should we ask for it? And they contend that if Rav Moshe would be alive nowadays and he would see quinoa, he would have permitted them also the same way he permitted in areas that ate peanuts, the peanut as well, and it makes sense. It makes sense.
Why potatoes are allowed? Potato flour?
Why?
Because it wasn't around in the time of Chazal?
So they did have potatoes, not as much, but the reason why they allowed it more, it's a good question, the post can bring down, is because its shape is very large. Now all these other things that we're dealing with now are very small, the same way grains are after they're taken and before you grind them up, the grains that you extract from the stalks are always small. And usually things that turn into chametz are very, very small grains. Potatoes are very large. So they weren't afraid that Amiarit would come to get mixed up between potato and potato flour and the flour from the other grains, because at the time where they grind them to make them into the flour, they look extremely different.
But that example you gave, the Amaoris walked into the breaded fish.
Right. So again, that was right.
See cake.
That wasn't why we asked it. That was just another mindset the poskim brought down. But that wasn't the reason why they answered everything to begin with. That just showed why it was necessary to start off with such a gzera. But potatoes, the poskim brought down that almost everybody, even though there were a few gedolim here and there that mattered, that answered potato flour. Kemat, everybody, that I've known, that I see, permit it. Those who are machmir know that's only a chumrah, an added chumrah upon themselves, because again, the potatoes the way it looks is totally different than all the other types of grains before they come to be ground. Now,
peas, like green peas.
Well, peas again, they're grown in shoots. They're the same way that they assered mustard seeds. Because they're grown in sprouts and shoots, so the peas and the green beans and all these things also are grown the same way, and they look the same. I've seen flour made out of these things, all these healthy food stuff, especially nowadays. Nowadays especially, that we have all this new technology that they're making food from everything. Every diet people are turning everything into flour and adding it into drinks and this and that. So really, the svaras of Chazal are applicable more nowadays, I think, than even before, because you're turning everything into flour. You go into the healthy section, and they've made everything. I've seen pea flour, and I've seen everything. I've seen every flour imaginable. Rice flour, we've all known exists, right? So it's shaykh. But quinoa, at least, according to those who matter it, right, the star K and the OU this year, is because we don't have to answer all the things that were not in the time of Chazal when they answered it. They didn't have it, so then who says that we have to come and answer it? Now, it's true, it is grown in fields next to fields with grains that could become chametz. And even the Star K and the OU mentioned that, and they say that, well, we found fields in Japan or somewhere in India, I don't know, wherever they found them. They're totally separate, and they have meshkichim there, meshkiach tamidi, a meshkiach that's there all the time, some poor guy, so is sitting in the other end of the earth, somewhere next to that plane in Malaysia, wherever they're able to find. They're all there, and he's there watching to make sure that no grains get mixed in. So they say that it's permissible. They went through all the different reasons that they answered quinoa, and they looked one after another, and they say, hey, look, these reasons are not necessarily applicable to the quinoa, and we're making sure that nothing gets mixed in, and according to them it's permitted, right? And it's funny that the OU did change their mind this year. Some say it's because the hotels demanded it, and some people say that no, they actually went and they looked into it, that
or the Star K did.
Yeah, the Star K has always permitted it. The Star K has always permitted it. But now we have to understand the svaras of the Osrim, right? What's the svar of those who answer it? And the svar who asked it also makes a lot of sense. If you're looking at the poskim for quinoa, because we see those who the same shah that we have for peanuts, and why peanuts actually mutter aser. Right? Peanuts weren't around at the time of Chazal either, and we know that but Moshe's psak notwithstanding, most people, or everybody, all Ashkenazim, don't eat peanuts. Even after his psak, they don't eat peanuts, and that is because we see the tshuva of the Avnei Nezer, and we saw the tshuva of the other gedolim that say that we see peanut flour, and they saw peanut oil, and they saw different things made out of peanuts, and they said that it's not eaten. And so since it was brought into the conversation, even after the time of Chazal, is proof that we do don with things, we do look into things afterwards. And another example the poskim who asked to bring is mustard itself. Mustard seed is not a legume. It's not part of the Kitniyos family, whatever that family is. It's brought into a pile together like other Kitniyos are, and it's grown in shoots and sprouts the same way others are. And that was enough for Chazal to say that it's included in the Kitniyos Isser. That being the case, that now that you have quinoa, which is sold as a grain, like all the other grains, even though it might not be in the grain family, if you go to the supermarkets, you go into other stores, it's sold in the grain family. So since it's sold in the grain family, it's gathered together in the fields the same way mustard is gathered into the fields, and it's also gathered, which is also the same way that chametz gum, or real chametz, or things that turn into chametz, are gathered into the fields. So therefore, it's included in the Isser of Kitniyos. And that is the Nikulus HaMachlokas between those who Aser and those who Mater, and those who just say, ask your local Orthodox rabbi, because there are Tzadim Lekan and Lekan. I'm not going to give a decision. I'm not going to put my head in between the Svaras of the Gedolim. But those who Mater and those who Aser have their Svaras on both sides, and whoever has a Shalah should speak to the Rav.
Back on the reasoning for potatoes, why is corn?
Well, corn is small. Again, corn before it's ground is very, very small. So that's similar. That's similar. But again, before it's ground,
Corn cob,
corn cob is big, but the corn itself are very, very small. Each one individually are very small. So that's more similar to those grains that can come into chametz. But potatoes are more larger, each one separately by themselves.
If somebody actually got a corn, you wouldn't mistake it for a grain.
A small one. But
no, I mean a
cob.
Right. Get it.
Right.
You could get baby potatoes are small too, but I mean when you think of corn.
Right. I guess again that's how now. It's not one thing I've seen. It's a good question. Making a good point. It's not the Kitniyos are not an exact science. You can, if you dig around deep enough, you will find holes here and there, like the one you're saying. You have small potatoes. They have baby potatoes. So how come they allowed? A good thing they didn't ask for potatoes. Otherwise, people would really be stuck. Everyone just becomes Sephardi, and then that would be the end of it, right? But at least they have potatoes, right? But that's right. But there are. Depending on what was there, what they had, what they didn't have, how much people were making a mistake from one to the other also played a role in what they answered.
But they didn't have corn around at all time.
That depends which place. I guess not.
No, they had to have corn.
North America.
It's the North American corn.
Oh, American is corn.
So the truth is that these types of foods, mustard and corn, the fact that we don't eat it is also a raya, is also a proof to why we shouldn't eat quinoa also. Because the same reason why, whatever machlokas they had about corn, whenever they saw that they had it, and they held that it was part of the Kitniyos family. So I'm sure the people back then saying, corn, we never had this in Europe, it should be mutter. And they said, what do you mean? It's part of the Kitniyos family, because you can make corn flour, we know there's plenty of corn flour. The different reasons that are shaykh by the other Kitniyos are shaykh also by corn. So the same way that's usher, quinoa should also be usher as well. So again, this is where the different machloksim and different svaras, we have to see if it's shaykh, the reasons that we brought in the beginning of this year or not.
Sephardi corn.
Sephardi meat corn.
No problem. You wouldn't do the same. Would you do the separation where you just got the rice?
Well, it has to have a vikua. It has to be checked. It has to be checked in to make sure that nothing was added to it. That's 100% and nothing. Yeah, but it would be checked.
Not grain by grain.
Not grain by grain. Yeah, I've asked my mother, but I don't think so. And now the last shiloh we'll discuss by Kitniyos is a new shiloh, which is really new, and this is kedai really to speak to whoever your posik is about this. And this is what we call Kitniyos shenishtana. Kitniyos that their form has been changed, and when we say by that, it means doesn't just mean oil extract, because obviously, chametz that has oil extract, let's say alcohol is still chametz, and we don't call that chametz shenishtana, and then all of a sudden that becomes mutter, right? That's ridiculous. But Kitniyos shenishtana means Kitniyos that have been changed due to the process they go through, with modern technology. It's totally changed. Examples are ascorbic acid, citric acid, Diet Coke, Shiloh, right? There's MSG, all these corn-based oils that are chemically changed, that are in the drinks that Zale holds or Yag Yavar, that if you eat them, that the person will God forbid be sick, immediately if you touch any of these types of aspartame. All these things have different traces, different types of corn contents that are totally changed, that are nishtana, and it's a machlokas whether or not we should give these products, these elements, the status of Kitniyos, because it shouldn't be chal. How can we call these things Kitniyos if they're totally and completely different than what they started from? Now, you could argue and say, well, what's the difference between that and oil? It should be the same thing. If we're going to ask for oil, how can we permit these? Now, the Star K, as far as I understand from their website, looks like they forbid, they don't allow foods that are Kitniyos shenishtana, and the OU permits them. Now, what the Shiloh is totally in, how much it's changed, one should ask the Rav, because by us consumers, they don't tell us all this. You have to go and find out, and you could see something that says OUP, and you'll have no idea if there's Kitniyos Nishtana in it or not. According to, it could be your Rav hold Kitniyos Nishtana as Aser, because it's no different than oil and other things. I heard B'Shem Rabbi Miller that someone asked him about Kitniyos Nishtana. He told them, well, what's the difference between? He goes, alcohol is chametz nishtana. So we're not going to start drinking alcohol that's extracted from chametz. So Kitniyos is part of the same. If Kitniyos was part of the same zera, just because we extracted and we changed the way it looked.
It's modeled after.
Yeah, it's right. It's modeled after chametz. Right. The whole isra of Kitniyos is modeled after chametz. So why should it make a difference? Now this shiloh is not brought down in the early poskim. This is a modern, the Rabbanim from our time, right? Belsky and Rabbi Miller. These are the poskim who are debating on Kitniyos Nishtana, and each organization has its own policy. Now, if one doesn't know what they hold, so he has to ask his Rabbi to see what it is that you do, because they won't tell you. You can go. It's also all year round according to you. Okay, very good. But the OU who permits it, right, will have traces of Kitniyos Nishtana in there, and those who don't allow it, right, will hold. A lot of people don't drink Coke or Diet Coke on Pesach because they hold Kitniyos Nishtana or Aser.
They're machalik between, say, corn oil, which they don't consider corn derivative, versus HF.
Right. In other words, the corn oil is worse than mechanically and processed corn oil or corn extract that's totally different and changed and has a different name altogether. Right? It's now called ascorbic acid, or it's now called aspartame, or it's now called MSG. It's not called corn oil. It's not called oil extract or corn extract. It has a totally different name, a totally different shame. Its whole shame is its whole mahus is different, and that's the svar of those who the OU who matters.
The Gemara that talks about the name, what you call it, makes a big difference.
Look at min b'mino, right? Okay, yeah, maybe that's where they get it from. I'm not sure, but this idea. Very little is written on it, Kitniyos Nishtana, even on the website. If you look around, the Star Key I felt had the most in-depth about all these things. The OU website I felt left a lot to be desired, but the Star Key at least definitely went. Yeah. Also, we will. They'll also be. We skipped over.
The COR.
No, I didn't look through it yet. I have to speak to Rabbi Rosen. Was the one in charge of it this year. Our own Rabbi Rosen is in charge of the Pesach pamphlet, and he wrote an article about Kitniyos, so he should know very well what their policies are. But I found that Star K was very forthcoming and very clear in the website with different whatever they held was asher, what they held was mutter, why they held it was mutter, the svars behind it. It was much more informative. I was able to get a lot of information from there. I didn't know all the citric acid and all the other corn-based things. So they have a nice long list of what they hold very clearly. What they hold is Kitniyos, what they hold isn't Kitniyos. It's right there, very clear, and what they give kashas on, reflects what they hold. So we'll stop over there. If you have any questions over anything that we said, anything specific, any specific foods?
Why is oil not allowed?
Which one? Regular Kitniyos oil?
Yeah.
Because they modeled Kitniyos to mirror foods that turned to chametz as well. In other words, the same way that the alcohol that we extract from different grains of chametz, like let's say barley or anything else, those liquids that we extract them are considered chametz. So the liquids and the oils that we're going to extract from Kitniyos also are going to be forbidden, because again, when Chazal answered the Kitniyos, they tried as best as they could to model it after the chametz itself.
Why is there an issue? I think I know the answer, but why is there an issue about the bashishim? By Kitniyos, not by Kitniyos oil or the citric acid.
Why isn't there a shiloh?
Yeah, like why can't you
matter before?
Because of the.
Well, again, if those who permit it will permit it before Pesach, because if a little particle of Kitniyos would get in, it would be patul, right? It would be.
So if you buy your.
In other words, those poskim who are mattering peanut. I mean, now again, it's not again because nobody's mattering it anymore. But those Rabbanim who mattered peanut oil, right? Let's say Rav Pesach Frank in the Mikrai Kodesh, who also has a whole long arichas over here, the Gabi peanuts, and he really goes to depth in the Lamdius exactly how and in what surah the Kitniyos was aser, which I used it a lot for this year. He holds that that peanuts are aser. Even though he found reasons to be makel for peanuts, he says lamaisa we don't eat peanuts, so he asered them. But he mated peanut oil, right? He mated peanut oil, and
let's say peanut oil is
and he held that the reason why you could be makel on peanut oil is because for the reason that you just said, it could be batal b'shishim. If it's made with care and make sure none of the Kitniyos themselves would get into the peanuts, would get into the oil. I'm sorry. So before Pesach, batal b'shishim. Even on Pesach, if Kitniyos were to fall into something, it's not aser b'mashu, it's batal. So now, batal b'rov even. So if that's the case, so it should be mutter, and that's why he held it was mutter, because he held there's a way to make it before Pesach to make sure nothing would fall in, and even if a minuscule amount would fall in, it wouldn't necessarily cause problems. So again, depending on which poskim held in what side of the fence.
So because I'm thinking, let's say you had a chocolate bar. You made a chocolate bar, and the chocolate bar, just a pure milk chocolate bar, but it was...
So that's also shalom. We didn't even speak about coffee, coffee and cocoa. Whether those are bechlal the Isser Kitniyos or not.
They're not.
So yeah.
So anyway, so let's say you had this chocolate bar that was made before Pesach, right? And you use peanut oil as part of the manufacturing process, maybe on the machine or whatever else. But there's no peanuts. It's not a peanut chocolate bar, right?
Right.
And then you buy it. Then you buy the chocolate bar before, and then you.
So again, according to those who hold that we didn't mirror the oils of the Kitniyos, like the extract and the oils we extract from the regular chametz, then you're right. It's clear from Tzvi Pesach Frank that he didn't understand the way that most poskim don't allow. All the kasher organizations over here in North America do not allow any oil extracted from any sorts of Kitniyos.
Right.
So
because people buy on Pesach. So the issue is if you bought it before and you bittel it beforehand, it would be.
But again, you could buy it before, but again, the kashrus is different before also. In other words, you won't find an OU or a star K or a COR or anything of any type of oil extracted from Kitniyos. You won't find it because again, they held, like most of the poskim held, that the gzera of Kitniyos, the Isser of Kitniyos, was mirrored and it was modeled after chametz itself, the grains that contain the chametz. So the same way that the oils extracted from them will be also by Kitniyos as well. But you're right, those who hold that's not true. Like Tzvi Pesach Frank held, that you could technically kasher peanut oil, right? The oil that the peanut oil would be mutter. So you're right. In the Chanami, he holds that if it was made from before Pesach, and it was made with tachlis ahidr, and there's good kashrus on it, and it's totally separate, and there's good meshkichim and reliable meshkichim, you could technically it would be he held. In your case, it would be mutter to have that type of chocolate.
What other nuts are prohibited, like kidney?
So, I'm sorry? Yeah, tree nuts. Right, tree nuts are almost all of them. I saw Eretz Yisrael. They called pistuchim. They call them American peanuts. Some are called all different types of peanuts. They have like 7, 8 different names. I know a lot of people after pistachios. A lot of people don't eat cashews. A lot of families have 1 or 2 variations that they permit or that they don't know. It's very difficult for me to go through a whole list of each nut and to aser or mater.
Almonds are okay.
Depends. These are all totally in the same machlokim as all other ones. If you have a clear masor on one or the other, so then you know. Otherwise, they're included. But I would look in the star case list, and also to see if your family has a clear minhag. A lot of times, again, like we said before, some people don't eat garlic. And there's nothing to do with Kitniyos. I'm not going to sit here and say garlic is mutter. For me, garlic in my rice is a staple of Pesach. And the people look at me, and people laugh at me, right? Okay.
Yeah.